Over the past 75 years, more than 10,000 chemicals have entered our food supply, but the EU allows just 300 additives. At Thrive Market, we prioritize quality, banning over 1,000 ingredients found in conventional grocery stores. Our Healthy Swap scanner helps you find better versions of your pantry essentials without the junk, dyes, or fillers, and everything is delivered right to your doorstep. So shop at a grocery store that actually cares about your health at thrivemarket.com/get-started for 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift.
Most weight loss plans are one size fits all, not taking into account each person's individual needs. Noom is here to change that. Noom Weight uses psychology. That's why they say losing weight starts with your brain. But it also takes into account your unique biological factors, which also affect weight loss success. The program helps you understand the science behind your eating choices and why you have cravings. Everyone's journey is different, so your daily lessons are personalized to you and your goals. One of the great things about Noom is that it's nourishing instead of restrictive. They focus on progress instead of perfection. You don't have to give up carbs, or anything for that matter. Have cravings? Food FOMO? Noom can help you lose weight while still enjoying your favorite foods. To date, Noom has helped more than 5.2 million people lose weight. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom's psychology and biology-based approach. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. If you just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. I'm super excited about today's guest, Alan Graham. He's also known as Captain Pink. Now, you can check this guy out. He's written 3 books. He was the brother-in-law of Jim Morrison. We're not going to get into everything tonight, okay? We're going to have him come back several times. Go to his website, which is coronado-clarion.com. You go there, and then you put in /silo, and it gets even there a little bit better. But that's the website is coronado-clarion.com /silo, S-I-L-O. Or you can email him directly at lizardalive@yahoo.com. You can check him out, too, on Facebook, at Alan Graham on Facebook. You want to meet him in person? Jim Morrison Museum is going to be open up in Cancun, Mexico. That's going to be coming up shortly, so you can keep up with what's going on with that. And if you want to hang out with him and have a drink with him, he's got this underground speakeasy, the Last Whiskey Bar, where he's meeting people in person. Mr. Alan Graham, are you there?
I am. Thank you for having me on, young man.
Thank you so much. Oh, somebody calls me young man. I love you. Before we get into...
Whenever I ask people, do you know this guy? I'm talking about criminals. They go, why? He's not after me, is he? He's not investigating me, is he? So you've got quite a rep out in the world, son.
Okay, thank you very much. You wrote these 3 fascinating books about Jim Morrison. One is called, they're not all about Jim Morrison. Let's see here, pull them up real quick. One is called I Remember Jim Morrison Too, Before the Beatles Were Famous, and Poet Run by Alan Graham. 3 books you can get if you go to that coronado-clarion.com website. But before we get into all of that, who is Alan Graham?
Alan Graham. Well, I've always been a guy who wanted to be somebody else. By that I mean this guy by day and that guy by night, and the guy in the middle who has to go to work. So I've got about what I call 11 separate personalities. I've got 11 separate outfits. I'm a pirate. I'm a bodyguard. I'm a private investigator. I'm a priest for real. I'm a minister for real. And I'm a Scotsman who dresses up in full kilt because of my name, Graham. And I'm a martial arts expert. I teach old people in homes how to mess people up as they come near them with the simplest of gadgets.
Very interesting. Now, so how about your childhood? Now, you didn't, were you in the military or any kind of law enforcement?
Yeah, at 15, I was in what we call the Boys' Army, which was the very same regimen, food, training. My mentors were Winston Churchill specialists called the Commandos, who went over and blew up all the German bases when they couldn't be blown up because they were buried inside the fjords. So when they're done with the war, they came over and they all got jobs as military instructors. And they were my mentors for 2 years. They taught me how to map read, how to sew or stitch my leg up, how to keep quiet in the dark if I was hurt even, how to save a life and take a life, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Excuse me.
Now, was that like military training or like intelligence training too?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story. After that, I went on to be 17. I got a job right near the cabin. One day, I was having my favorite in the morning. It was 2 pieces of toast with marmalade on and a cup of tea. And it was a rainy, frosty day. And I was enjoying it. And somebody on my right shoulder said, "Did you drop that?" I looked down. It was like a half a crown, 50-cent piece in your world. And I said, "No, I didn't, but I went down to pick it up, and I was going to give it to the waitress." I looked at my plate, and there's someone has left a note. And it didn't say any words. It just gave me Earth coordinates, which I was proficient in because I'd read map reading. I mean, I'd done all the military training you need by the age of I was 16. So I went to the coordinates. Well, by the way, the guy who left behind me was the guy who put the note in. And I didn't see his face, but I saw he was kind of like a, foreign office fellow, straight cut, straight dyed, but secret, innocuous and secret. So I got a glimpse of the side of his head, and I just had a feeling, this is them. I went to the Earth coordinates. I didn't see anything, not one thing. I was about to go home, and I saw it. And I saw it. Something only I would know, and I can't even tell you, or I'll have to kill myself. But I saw it right in the corner of my eye. And it was another place where I went and found another set of Earth coordinates. It led me to a field outside of Liverpool in an old abandoned warehouse. I went inside, and I found written instructions, what my mission was, and I went on it. And over the years, that's the only way I get information from the people I work for. They're so stealth and so secret that they don't even know who they are themselves.
Well, Alan, let me ask you this, and Alan Graham, in that note with the coordinates, did they tell you what your compensation was going to be for this job?
You never ask ghost questions like that to these people. You were assigned more than you had a choice. If you were chosen, it was because of the particular talent or skill that you had, and there was no refusing unless you were dead. So, but the compensation was, I wouldn't say it was wonderful. No, it was just like you're doing, sabotage shit. You'd expect billions of dollars for it. You're going to get a nice little stipend. You're going to be able to buy a couple more suits. You're going to be able to take your girl out to a better restaurant. You know what I mean? Bump your lifestyle up, because stealth was the answer there too. To suddenly start showing income was foolish.
So I guess this early part of your life, this is when you were hanging out at the cavern where the Beatles used to play?
I worked across the street at a tailor shop. I was a tailor assistant, and I was dressed impeccably, showing the product. Jackson the tailor on Lord Street, 1/2 block from my store, was a little tiny alley called Matthew Street. Down about 100 feet, and to the right was the cabin. You could still smell the groceries that were in there, apples and oranges, pears, and the ones next door to this warehouse were still operating as fruit warehouses. There was a great distribution center called the Fruit Market on Matthew Street. Little tiny pub there where all the Beatles went. Everybody, well, now there's even a little Beatles shop at the end of it. Cool place to visit. Go see Liverpool. I am.
Well, you wrote the book before the Beatles were famous. What can we find in the book?
Well, you can find that I used to go there about noon, and they'd be playing there. They just got back from Germany. They were cool as all hell. They had black leather boots, Beatle boots, had that half European Spanish boot. Anyway, they were cool. They pointed a little bit, like the Winkle Pickers of the 50s before that. They had leather jackets on, and the long hair they had was combing it over their brow. Nobody had long hair yet. Then they started. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, my favorite group was going, bang, a hit. I come to work, and the next thing I know, Beatles mania all over the city. Oh, my God. People making homemade this, homemade that. It was like a celebration. A Scouser made it big. 4 Scousers. Holy shit. I followed them to London, not them. A year later, after they left, I went to London to find a better life. And when I got there, the Beatles were... No, here's the way. I'm digging a ditch right near St. George's Hills in a place called Esher. A purple and purple paisley, Rolls Royce, drove by the ditch. And I looked at the guy digging it. And the Irishman was, he said, you know who that is there now, don't you? I said, no. He said, that's John Lennon and Paul McCartney. And look, they lived right across the street. And by God, they were getting out of the purple Rolls Royce. I landed right where they were. How about that?
Well, we're going to be getting into your later life. You did a lot of stuff with Larry Flint and some of those infamous bodyguards around Flint, like Marty and Menser and Bill Ryder and that crowd, and some of your other adventures in your life. Okay, but early on, with your connection to the Beatles, did you ever find anything suspicious about the death of John Lennon or the...
Absolutely, and Bruce Lee. I know more about Bruce Lee's death.
Well, let's start with Lennon. What can you tell us about the Lennon death?
First of all, he didn't die on the sidewalk. And that bullet was high speed. It went right through him without piercing any vital organs. If you know your firearms, you know this is possible. Fortunately, well, that's where Yoko comes in, and I can't go too much into detail, but there was a grim cabal of accountants and money managers and bankers and people invested in his label, in his name. As a consequence, he was a bread and butter. He was fading out. He was getting weird. And he was having Yoko Ono manage his money. No manager. No. Not like the Apple record. They were crooks, but he didn't have a certified public accountant. She ran it all because he said, I don't know what to do with all of this. And she grabbed it off him, of course, as the grifter that she was and still is. I don't care what anyone says. She tried to get Paul McCartney and everyone else in the Beatles before John Lennon was weak enough to fall for her Mata-Hari bullshit.
We watch the language, Paul. Watch the language, Alan.
Did I say bullshit?
Yes, you did a couple of times. But we got to really stay on top of that, okay?
Sorry.
Now,
slap me down.
For the audience, I just want to insert something here for the audience. I just recently interviewed once again May Pang from The Lost Weekend, and there's a great documentary film out there called The Lost Weekend: A Love Story. It's really, really good. And I tell you, Alan, you might be happy to know that a lot of people are coming out forward now, and they're not afraid to talk about Yoko like they once were even just a few years ago.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Well, I've been talking about the witch for years because I knew her. I saw her. I watched her. Scruffy, loony, incense and flowers in her hair and diamonds in the sky. And the only one who fell for that, you tell that to a person in Liverpool, they go, get away, you dirty mental hippie.
Well, Alan
she
Graham,
was
what do you say to the people who say that she was a witch and she was involved with some rather extreme cult-type folks?
Precisely so, who would come into play when they found out, all the power brokers found out she was the golden calf, not him. They could get anything from her. She was a heroin addict. We infiltrated her butler with the book. We infiltrated their trash. We got the data that said John Lennon is a zombie. And Yoko is the one at all the meetings with the finance. And she hates to do it, but she knows she's got to do it. So the people who were invested in that asked us, and we returned their favor for something they did for us, to show them the juxtaposition of Yoko with all the money and John with all the ownership, and vice versa. None of the ownership John had. She had it all, except the people above her had lion's share. She got pennies and still does. But those pennies are billions.
Well, Alan Graham, let me ask you a question. When you mentioned the butler, are you talking about Fred Seaman?
Yeah, the guy who wrote the book.
Yeah. I'm trying. Yeah, he called me the other night. I missed this call. And when you talk about checking their garbage, are you talking about A.J. Weberman?
Everybody's son.
When you talk about
listen, if John Lennon left a paper chip bag on his park bench, we got it.
But when you talk about checking his trash, his garbage, are you talking about A.J. Weberman? Did you use A.J. Weberman for that?
We used him and a bunch of other people who came in and out of that because they could have been thieves. They could have been having a correspondence and throwing it away. Anything. Gotcha. Anyone, everyone, and anyone. Even the trash men. We talk with them. Hey, look, if you're going to do a stealth operation, you've got to get... The art of war teaches us this phrase. To know. What does to know mean? Well, Master General Lee says, you must know everything. How far away is your enemy? Is anyone in the camp disloyal and could be bribed? How much water and food does he have? Are they hilly terrain or they're flatlands? Every single thing, because if you have every single thing that is to be known about that place, you will send spies there, you will have researched it, and before you get out of bed, you will have won the war. On the other hand, if you lack one single digit off, for example, someone didn't record that there was a body of water 200 yards long, like a small river, and it was hard to cross. That would have delayed you. That would have made it would have been against the pure math that the art of war is. That's why it's such a successful book. It is pure math. It is a precise examination, analysis of what the situation is, and that's how you know how to beat it. If you don't have all the knowledge, you might as well stay in bed.
We're talking to Alan Graham, also known as Captain Pink. You can find him on Facebook. You can email him directly at lizardalive@yahoo.com. He's going to be working with the Jim Morrison Museum in Cancun, Mexico. And just email him if you want to meet up with him at his underground speakeasy, the Last Whiskey Bar. You also wrote a book, I Remember Jim Morrison, and that's because you married Jim Morrison's sister.
Yes, in 1965, I came back to Earl's Court, and at that time, it was like fantasy. There's a tiny little place called Earl's Court where all the tourists on their summer vacation, mostly students, came from all over the world. Well, Australia, America, Canada, France. And it was like a melting pot. It was the coolest place. All the music was playing. You could go in the casino around the corner, see Paul McCartney at the tables. You could see the rock and rollers walking out of the subway station. It was not all this private yet. It was like they were on the street with us. as a consequence, I had a Liverpool accent, which went like this. Excuse me, could you show me the way to Brompton Road, please? I'm new, I'm not from here. That was a soft Liverpool accent. And I was an immediate success. American girls would corner me and say, Alan. They'd have four or five more friends. They'd both say something in English. And I said, what do you want me to say? And they'd all go, oh, Google. Well, the bell rang. And I said, Al, you're the fifth Beatles, son. I just as might have well been the Beatles to them because I had 11 girlfriends, one English one, and 10 Americans. And I was in bliss. They washed my shirts. They did everything for me. It's like, I'm a Beatle.
Yeah, if you go to coronado-clarion.com, you can see some pictures of a young Alan Graham, very handsome young man there. I'm sure you had a way with the ladies. So when you first met Morrison, was he already on his way with his big rock career? What was going on with that?
Well, his sister and I married and stayed in London. The parents went back to America. As far as we was concerned, he graduated in '65, and for 2 years he went missing because his father had threatened to get him put in the draft now that he's no longer in college. And so he went out, hid in Venice for a year under a tarp and ate out of a dumpster. And he had a little street gang there. Anyway, Ray Mandrake was walking down Venice Pier. He saw Jim Morrison. He said, Jim, remember me from film school? Jim said, yeah, Ray, how's it going? He said, Ray said, well, what are you doing? And he held it up. Jack Daniels said, this. And Mandrake said, what else? And he said, this. And he gave him a book of poems that he was writing. The first poem said, let's swim to the moon. Let's climb through the tide. Surrender to the waiting years. A city sleeps to hide. And Mandrake just went, wow! Listen, I want you to come with me because I've got a band, Rick and the Ravens. I want you to play with us and do this. He said, I don't sing. He said, yeah, but that's poetry, man. We'll do something. Morrison went. One of the band didn't like him. The others tolerated him because he did have great lyrics, tons and tons and tons of poems. So he became famous, but none of us knew it until Clara Morrison went back to America in 1967 because the Admiral had got a job there at the Pentagon. When that happened, we came. And when we heard he was famous, but it was all over the press now, we went to see him at LA Airport with his nephew Dylan and me and his sister, and he just looked at us as if to say, you wouldn't happen to be my sister, would you? He looked different. We looked certainly different. And she said, yeah, this is your nephew, and this is your brother-in-law, Alan. He picked up the baby. We all walked to the garage. We drove him down to Santa Monica. The freeway was clean and beautiful. All the houses were painted white. And he said, stop. And he looked down, and the sign said, Christopher Columbus Transcontinental Highway. That's what the Santa Monica Freeway is really called. He said, I think this is where it's all going to happen, man. The revolution. It's all going to happen right here in Middle America. He wasn't talking about a revolution of turning stuff down. He was talking about a revolution of people becoming self-sufficient, making their own clothes, making their own jewelry, making their own food, not participating in the war machine, doing it yourself. And we did.
Let me say this to Alan Graham. You mentioned earlier that his father was an admiral, and his father was in charge of the Gulf. Was at the Gulf of Tonkin, right? They created the Vietnam War. Is that correct?
He was a captain during that conflict, okay. And what happened was, in addition to the Tonkin War, the Israelis nuked one of our ships because they didn't want anybody, the British or anybody. They had the balls to nuke. They nuked one of our ships. So the admiral wrote a report, and he said, let's nuke them back. He was gung-ho to smack the Israelis. The intelligentsia above him said, if we smack the Israelis, we won't have any presence in the Middle East. Do you get it? He had to acquiesce, but he would have done it. That was the state of mind.
Well, Alan.
And so what happened? What happened to the Gulf of Tonkin ended up this. Yes, this triggered the whole Vietnam War because it was a bunch of lies, like we do often when we want to move in and either protect our interests or to cut off someone stealing oil or whatever. That rules us. That power, the natural resources of each country, we put out, big fortunes to protect that. And that's what we were doing here.
Well, Alan, let me ask you a question now. Have you ever heard this theory put forth by Dave McGowan, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, that a lot of these rock and roll, these rock stars from the 60s, the whole hippie movement, was some kind of a psychological operation by the U.S. intel sources? What do you make of a theory like that?
Well, it's not a theory, actually, because any study can be done on anybody. And if you blow up the whole country like we did as teenies, you know Rand Institute and all of the think tanks and everybody's studying you. First of all, you're innocent. You're not doing it with that espionage in your mind, but you're playing right into the hands of people who would take this country down in a heartbeat.
So Alan, are you saying that you think that possibly Jim Morrison was influenced and manipulated by intelligence operations, and his music and his whole movement was influenced?
What it was managed. Listen to the lyrics. 5-1, baby. 1 in 5. No one here gets out alive. You get yours, baby. I'll get mine. Gonna make it, baby, in our prime. Now listen to the last part. You walk across the floor with your flower in your hand, trying to tell me no one understands. Trade in your hours for a handful of dimes. We're gonna make it in our prime. So his narrative was, here's the last part. The old get old and the young get stronger. May take a week and it may take longer. They've got the guns, but we've got the numbers. Gonna win, here we're taking over. Come on! That is textbook. What's the word?
Revolution. Rebellion.
Yeah, it's treason, actually.
Okay.
But unlike you, I could never be charged with treason because I'm a British citizen. And they could not charge me with treason. It's written in the law. How about that?
Then Alan Graham, did you see any kind of influences around Jim Morrison and the Doors that could have been intelligence operation influences? And you should be really keen to spotting that kind of stuff, right? You're a savvy guy. You would notice.
One afternoon during the fire season, L.A. was full of black smoke. There was like thick ashes in all the gutters. I was in a bar right next to Electra Studio with Jim, and Pamela had an antique shop across the way called Nemus. No, it was a boutique. And they were separated. So he wasn't talking to her because she was giving him So we come out of the bar, and she was coming in. And she said, "Oh, Jim, I got to talk to you. I'm so behind with the finances." We said, "Oh, yeah." We went back in and had one more drink. And then he gave her some little shot of bourbon, and then she started going to the bar. Said, and he put his hand on her and said, No. He knew what was coming, and she started drinking. So we manhandled her out of there as we crossed La Cienega to her boutique to take her back. We got to the other side. She did a big fainting thing, and slowly lay in the gutter. And Jim and I looked at her, and we just walked away, left her in the gutter. He called me the next day and said, "Oh, I'm so sad. You guys left me like that. If it hadn't have been for Ned was one of those creatures at a boutique that she kept, a toy boy. If it hadn't been for Ned taking care of me," well, she was faking the whole thing. She was a drama queen. But then he said, he said, she collapsed, he said to her, hey, guess who's loser of the week? There was a bar to the left called Losers Club, and every week they had a sign of whoever got messed up or whatever it was. And this week, it was Smokey and the Bear because of all the fires. And he said to her, who do you think it is this week? And she said, Janis Joplin. And we all just fell out laughing. She didn't even know it was funny. Janis had just died, and then Jimmy had died. And Jim Morrison said, oh, wait a minute, three's a charm. Ah!
Wow.
By God, I walked in prophecy, and I walked there with a serpent who I consider nothing but a serpent in his life. Pamela, a heroin addict, a liar, a hyperactive. Oh, when she was a little girl, at 14, she ran away and joined a group with a Fagin-esque character, a 40-year-old man, bunch of hippie kids living in his house. He taught them how to rob residential houses. They all got busted. She went to a detention center. And that's where she came from. Her mother was psycho. Her father, oh my God, he was a teacher, and he thought he knew more than Morrison's or Jim Morrison's father. They were awfully gross, middle America, pedestrian people who, if challenged, would be wrestled to the floor by the English language. And that's about as intelligent as I can quote them. They were stupid as all hell. And he was a principal in a high school.
Really? Well, so now you're talking
Yes.
about Pamela Corson. Now, when you watch the Oliver Stone movie, well, we're supposed to trust Oliver Stone, this character. She comes off as this, such a lovely woman. But your impression of her was far different.
Well, I coached Val Kilmer, by the way. And I was very disappointed in that movie, of course, needless to say. Because Jim did not walk around all the time going, and the answer to the wind and the question.
Right.
He talked like you and me, but all through the movie, Ollie's got him dressed in leather pants already before he's famous. That didn't come until 2 years later. And he's got him doing this stupid dialogue. Talking of Pamela, I'll give you this quick story that should sum it up for you. We arrived at that apartment at the Santa Monica freeway ride. He introduced, this is Pamela, my girlfriend. This is my sister. Her eyes went like two saucers. She ran into the bedroom and came out with a big wooden box, big jewelry box. And she grabbed Anna by the arm and said, come here, Anna. Took her into the kitchen. And Jim and I and the others, we went and sat by the pool. We were going to go sit by the pool. And the reporter was coming in, too. And so after about 30 seconds, Anna came out like white as a sheet. I said, what's going on? She said, she just showed me a will. And it was on a ripped open envelope in Jim's name. And it said, if I die, everything goes to Pamela Curzon. And after that, she dies, it goes to Ann Morrison and Andy Morrison, my brother and my sister. Mm. Anna just looked at us as to say, well, she could tell you to go without smiling. I mean, without breaking a... She had a deadpan, and she came away telling me she was shaking. She just showed her brother's will to her. Like, no privacy, and such a shock. Because Jim had been missing, and he was... we might not ever see him again, and there's a conniving little snake looking after for his money. Why was that there? Because she demanded, she told my wife. I said, you've got to write something down the way you're living. I can't be left alone. She was always in it for the money. Like any grouping, you join because you get whatever free, and you become somebody. But groupies are groupies.
Alan, let me ask you a question. Alan Graham we're talking to. The website is called, one more time, it's called Coronado dash, let me pull this up quick.
Coronado-Clarion.
There it is, Coronado-Clarion.com. I asked you if there could be any...
/
forward slash silo, SILO. I asked you before if there was any possibility of an intelligence influence in the Doors and Morrison, and right away you start telling me this story about Pamela Corson, about her falling down drunk in a bar. And you tell me about her background. She comes from a pretty middle-class, lower-class background, and not too well-educated. And here she has this influence over this huge rock band. Now, could it have been that she was some type of police informant, some type of asset that was inserted into Jim's life?
Well, you notice the way I segued away from that question.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you notice I wrote it down. I'm asking you again.
No, I don't mind. I don't mind telling you this.
Yeah.
J. Edgar Hoover, I got it, had a file on Jim Morrison. FBI had a file on Jim Morrison, and several other, let's just say, other companies.
Okay.
Who have no rules and no oversight will do their own work. Morrison was considered dangerous to the government, considered dangerous to the society, because if it didn't meld back together and start going to work, and it listened to the lyric of, they've got the guns, but we've got the numbers. This is revolution, you're right. And that's what he was saying when he was drunk. When he was sober in his real mind, he was saying, no, I didn't mean that revolution. But people don't know. They're nuts. And if they turn loose, so Morrison had to be managed. And that's what he did. He was managed right out of the business, right into oblivion, right into weakness, not the leather guard as before, not the leader of any revolution, nothing. Just a guy who got arrested for pulling his pants down when he never did. But now he had become immersed in alcohol. I mean, it was impossible. He could put on one or two good shows, but that's what happened to him, and that was managed. That was managed. I'll tell you why. He was indicted in Miami for nothing. Max Finker's attorney was a very good friend of Ronald Reagan, who at the time was the leader of the Republican Party.
Right.
In fact, I think he was even governor. Yeah, he was governor. He made a call to Ronnie and said, Ronnie, my client here, because Max was a big hitter to the Republican Party for good reason. He could call him little favors like this. So Reagan agreed to let Jim Morrison be booked in Miami at midnight and have not to go to jail, but to be released on a bond, come back to California, wait for the trial. Unbeknownst to everybody in the world, that occurred. And only later do we know. So Ronald Reagan saved Jim Morrison's butt from going to be in jail at rape in prison. Oh my God! There's nothing more deplorable than a hot Florida prison, especially for a long-haired weirdo hippie who a little while ago was trying to corrupt all little girls and make a revolution in our country. All the conservatives were very happy when he fell from grace. But they did give him a little break because he was the admiral's son, and he didn't go completely down the tubes. That would lie in his own hands soon afterwards. However, if it were a hockey game, Pamela would have been given an assist because his death was never investigated properly, and it's in my book. And since then, I've gathered other information that just is, what's the word, pure evidence that she, not only she, but Yoko Ono and a bunch of other people were manipulated by a force so stealth. It's like this. The bankers rule the world. Everybody goes to the banker. The arms dealers rule the world. And every other, like we have the prison industrial complex now, because it's so big, someone's got to supply it. The military industrial complex is so vast, so many people working in it, so many jobs threatened. If one little thing goes wrong in the math there too. So he was managed off the stage into a place of non-public appearances and any of that. And anyway, by then, they'd blackened his name. Jackie Gleason, Anita Bryant, the Orange Juice Queen, had put on a big indecency rally. He couldn't get booked anywhere. No one would put up insurance. He was persona non grata. Almost till a year before he died, some miracle occurred. Somebody lifted one of the weights off, and it was that L.A. woman, Roadhouse Blues. It just came back hard rocking for right on the top of the charts again. Unbelievable. So he was free again. But he was burned out, tired. He didn't want to do it with them anymore. And he went to Paris to recuperate. Yeah.
And what do you make of the death in Paris? You're very suspicious of it.
Well, first of all, she didn't tell anybody who was famous. She just said it was her boyfriend. She took his belongings to the American embassy, and they said, well, you need his ID and all that stuff. She said, well, I'll bring it back tomorrow. The naval attaché in Paris got word that Jim Morrison's son had died. He called her and told her to come in and talk to them about what happened. It was all so suspicious the way it happened. She plugged him in the cemetery within 3 days, didn't go back to the naval attaché, didn't go back to the embassy, went directly to Los Angeles and engaged with their top lawyers on how to get Jim Morrison's estate. And that was the part I knew. The other part was this. I acquired some photographs of the death scene. Not the autopsy, the death scene. He was laying in a bathtub with his head to one side, a little bit of a smile, and a tiny trickle of blood. But did you ever take a bath with your head up against those big old-fashioned faucets?
Oh, the other way around. That's where you put your feet. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which means he was placed there, which is what you do for someone who's overdosed. That's a warm bath. Well, it didn't work. Then the plan was hatched by Agnes Varda, the great film director, by Marianne Faithfull, the rock and roll singer, and by the Count. He was a heroin dealer who brought the China White to the Cirque du Soleil that night when Jim died. Here's what happened. It wasn't until months later, because I focused on the face. I was doing artwork. I looked, there's the faucets. There's the faucets. That's proof enough to me that he didn't get in the bath like she said. She helped him into the bath. Why would he have his head up there like that? If you want to put some more hot water in, you'd be sitting the other way, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Then I called her up and I said, I know you did it. She said, what do you mean? I love Jim. I love him. I said, I'm coming for you. You're next. I hung up on her. She called the Admiral. Alan Graham threatened my life. It went all over the world. Alan Graham threatened her life because he believed she had something to do with it. Well, guess what, audience? Clara Morrison, Jim's mother, her firstborn Jim, she believed like I did. She believed that little witch offed him, or at the very least, gave him the pure heroin. It was pure Marseille, 89%, pure rocket fuel, junk in a month club, A-grade poison. And he took one snort in the bathroom because she told him, try this. It's great for sex. Well, he wasn't getting it up because he was drinking too much. So he gave it a go. He went in there and took a snort. Before he hit the floor, he was dead.
Well, Alan, you're telling me that he died from snorting heroin? I've never heard of anybody dying from snorting heroin.
China White, baby.
Really? Okay.
Only you don't. China White. You know what that is?
Yes, I do. I'm from New York.
Okay. So pure Marseille heroin. People with needle phobias like Morrison would never use a needle, but you can snort it. Have you never heard of that?
No, I've heard of snorting heroin. Of course I have, but I've never overdosing from snorting heroin. A couple of questions, real quick. What was Morrison's relationship with the Admiral up around the time of his death, the later part of his life? Were they totally estranged, or were they still in contact?
Wait a minute.
The Admiral, his father.
You never heard of lots of overdoses from snorting heroin?
No, I haven't. No, I really haven't. No, no.
It's quite common.
Okay.
Anyway, All right, so what was your next question?
With his relationship with his father, the admiral, toward the end of his life, toward his death.
East is east, west is west, and never the twain shall meet. They were looking the opposite the day he came to Coronado. He was at UCLA. He came down in 1965 to say goodbye to his father, who was going off with Carrier Division 9 to fight the war in Vietnam. As soon as Jim's father saw him, he asked the captain's bosun, take this man down and cut his hair. It was long, but it wasn't long. When he came back up, they shaved the back of his head. Morrison was pissed. He now had to go back to UCLA to all his friends and say, my dad shaved my head or whatever, or go hide out, because the worst thing you could do with a young hippie growing his hair is shave it. So Jim Morrison and his father never understood each other. Not one bit of their DNA allowed them. His dad was a warmonger. Jim was a pacifist. His father was highly educated, and so was Jim. But the admiral was a nuclear admiral, electronic warfare back then. He told me once, I was really disappointed in Jim Allen, because high IQ me, you know. He could have been anything. Could have been admiral, could have been anything he wanted. He chose to be a rock star. That was his little southern Alabama voice. Allen, Jim. So he was kind of like, he didn't get the big world, or the hippies, or any of it. He just considered them vermin, and they were trying to tear down the country, and Jim was the leader.
So you think the manner of the murder was heroin? Heroin.
The source of the heroin was from Pamela, who got it from the Count.
Gotcha.
The Count was counted. No, he was. He'd been compromised many years ago by a bad move he made, but he was left on the street to do certain projects.
And what happened to the Count after this? He's still operating. Where is he today?
He disappeared in Europe.
Gotcha.
And then he died or not.
And just for the audience to understand, Alan R. Graham, we're almost out of time now, but he's traveled in circles with Bill Menser and Alex Marti and Mitch Rebel and people. So if you're familiar with staged homicides, and staging a homicide in a bathtub is a pretty good way to do it, right? It's right up there, right? Is a way to do it.
Especially since he's been sitting there since 11 p.m.
Yeah.
You know, his body was wrinkled and bloated with.
Alan, we're running out of time. We only got about 5 minutes left. I'd like to reschedule with you really quickly and go into all the stuff, the Larry Flint days and your other type of security work and that kind of stuff. But what would you like to leave us with as far as Jim Morrison goes? What did you think of the Oliver Stone movie?
I thought it was awful, wretched. Oliver Stone knew nothing about the Doors or Jim Morrison. He would go in his office, production office, 24/7. For months, the Doors music would be playing. It drove you mad. You didn't want to go anymore. He thought that programming would get him and everybody into the mood. All it did was dull everybody's senses. He was an amateur given a great project by Bill Graham. The Admiral agreed to Bill Graham because he had a reputation of doing good. And I said to Bill Graham after I was working with Kilmer, and I talked to Bill Graham and said, it's a very important project, and I hope Oliver Stone doesn't make a terrible movie. He said, he's given me my word. Well, the movie came out bad. The Admiral and the family were crushed because it was so awful. And Oliver Stone, I called Oliver Stone up and I said to him, if I were you, I wouldn't fly anywhere in the next 3 weeks. He said, well, what do you mean, Alan? I said, you know what I mean. I don't know if he did that. But by God, as obliquely as God strikes, next 3 days later, Bill Graham has flown in one of his helicopters right into a power line, incinerating him. So he was the one who got it. He was the one who got the vengeance from the heavens. He died, not Oliver Stone. He was left behind to become a shadow of his former self, because now he's big on Russia, he's big on socialism, he's big against America, and he couldn't get a gig in America if he tried. Just like Steven Seagal, you go to the place where they don't care that you're a traitor or you're a liar. They just know your movie image from before, and they'll make your movies anyway. Over here, no one would spend a red cent on a Steven Seagal movie. No one would go listen to him. He's done so much weirdness.
Oh, yeah, I would love to do a show about Seagal. I would love to get into that. But back to Stone for a second. Do you believe his rewriting of history of that story was intentional, or he's just, kind of a...
Once again, he was managed to. Great influence. Japanese money. No. It was the Chinese mob that paid for that movie. Alex Ho was the financier for that. All of that money came from the Chinese mob, and they wanted their... Well, let's say, look, if you're the top of the heap and someone's working under your contract, you do what they want. You do what they ask. No doubt about it.
We got 1 minute.
I can't tell you the details, but...
We're talking to Alan Graham. Alan Graham, we only got about 1 minute left. I just want to tell people once again where they could find your stuff. I want them to go to this Coronado, CORONADO dash Clarion, CLARION.com /silo, SILO. And that's where you can find the books. And there's a lot of information on there about Alan Graham and his life and his upcoming events. You can find him on Facebook at Alan Graham, GRAHAM. Lizard Alive.
There's a teaser.
Sorry?
There's a teaser for you, a very important one.
Yes.
Morrison is buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. Or is he? Well, that's going to be, well, it was already an operation. Some information was extracted from that crypt, and we now have the DNA of the bones that were in there.
So these theories that perhaps Morrison faked his own death, is that a possibility?
When you see the film, which is coming, Who Killed Jim Morrison, you'll see that how flawlessly and seamlessly the whole conspiracy worked. Because Morrison was always passing out, he was always a drunk, and it was the perfect veil to hide a lot of evidence in.
Gotcha.
And that's what happened. You should know all of this, young man.
I want to hear more. Okay, I want to have you come back because there's a ton of information you have about a lot of other folks, especially the Larry Flint stuff. I've always been fascinated with Flint and Mitch Rebel and the assassination attempt there, where there's actually a signed check floating around where they hit on Mitch Rebel. So we got to have you come back. I'll contact you after we get off the air about scheduling quickly, okay, if that's okay with you.
Great interview. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Great interview.
Alan R. Graham.
Very good interview.
God bless you, my friend. Talk to you soon.
God bless you, son.
Bye.